The Divorce That Set Me Free. Author Zoe Lang Knox. This fictional story is set in Southeast Asia, early 1980s. Chapter 1. The Final Goodbye. Let's get a divorce. Rui WEi's voice was calm, detached, as if he were finalizing a transaction instead of ending a marriage. His gaze didn't flicker, his tone didn't rise. It was like he wasn't speaking to his wife of 3 years, but to a stranger on the street. He didn't know I had been reborn. Flashback. In my first life, I believed him. I believed him when he said it was only temporary, that the fake divorce would help us secure better government housing for our daughter, Rui WEi. I believed him when he said it was all for our future. So I agreed. 4 years ago, when Rui WEi was critically injured during a covert field operation, I sold my grandmother's jade pendant, the last heirloom I owned, to help cover his mounting medical bills. He was my high school crush, and even though we barely spoke, I loved him. He was in recovery for 6 months when the military turned its back on him the moment he was deemed unfit to serve. He was discarded, broken, with nowhere to go and no one willing to fight for him. We ended up living in a single, damp room behind an old noodle shop, barely big enough for a thin mattress and a rusted kettle. He couldn't work, and I scraped by doing whatever I could. Cleaning bathhouses, delivering parcels, hand-mending uniforms late into the night. I stretched every coin, rationed every meal, and pawned everything that wasn't nailed down. I bathed his wounds, advocated for his care, sat in waiting rooms for hours, argued with cold, indifferent officials. I reminded him who he was when even he couldn't remember. And then, on what we thought was his deathbed, he reached for my hand with trembling fingers and whispered that I was the love of his life, that if he made it out alive, he would fight to be with me forever. He proposed with no ring, only conviction in his eyes. And I said yes. Oh God, I can't believe I said yes. It was my savings, my grit, and my blind faith that helped us claw our way out of that hole. When he could walk again, it was my efforts that secured us a modest apartment. He found his footing because I refused to let him sink. I didn't just stay by his side, I carried us both. I believed in him, loved him, sacrificed for him. I was so stupid, I gave up everything to be with him, including my family. They did try to talk me out of staying with him, but I was in love and didn't listen to them until they severed all ties with me. And once we got the apartment, he brought Anya Zhang, the pretty little singer from the performance troupe, right to my door. He held her hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "We're already divorced. Don't bother me again." I was discarded like spoiled tea leaves. But not this time. I was ready. End of flashback. So I smiled. "All right, Rui WEi," I said softly, shifting Rui WEi and my arms. "Let's get a divorce." We left the military base in silence. He walked ahead with long strides, not once looking back. I trailed behind, carrying our daughter, barely 2 years old, like a forgotten burden. The sun was sharp, and the dust along the road clung to my shoes and skirt. Everything looked just as it had in my last life. The same street, the same silence, the same ache in my chest. "Mommy," Rui WEi said quietly, "why is Daddy walking so fast?" I ran my fingers through her soft hair and whispered, "Daddy has something important to do. We shouldn't bother him." Rui WEi paused. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. He heard me. He just didn't care. Flashback. In my past life, I would have believed the lie again, that he was just emotionally distant, that he didn't know how to express love. I would have waited for him to come around. I would have swallowed the pain, told myself it was all for the sake of our daughter. Until he brought Anya Zhang into our new home. She was all smiles, her red lips soft as silk. "Oh, Sister Mei Lin! Ex-sister, thank you for stepping aside." Rui WEi didn't even look at me. "We're already divorced, don't bother me again," he said. At the civil registry office, the clerk didn't even blink when Rui WEi handed him 2 cartons of Chung Ha cigarettes and said casually, "Yes, we're filing for divorce, voluntarily." The clerk clearly knew him. The process was done in minutes. As I held the divorce certificate in my hands, Rui WEi smirked. He thought he was finally free free to parade his lover around openly, free from the inconvenience of a wife and child. I looked up and smiled, remembering how he caused me to suffer, how he caused my daughter to be left motherless. "Congratulations, Captain Lee! You got what you wanted." His smirk faltered. He didn't expect me to be calm. In the past, his silence would have shattered me. I would have clung to his coat, cried, begged, but today I didn't shed a tear. I pulled Rui WEi closer and took a step back. "Now that we're officially divorced," I said with poise, "you go your way and we'll go ours. I wish you and Anma a very comfortable life, but from this day forward, don't ever interfere in ours again." Without waiting for a response, I turned away and walked toward the bus stop. Behind me, his voice rang out, shocked, confused. "Mei Lin, where are you going?" I didn't answer, because this time I wasn't going to wait for him to ruin me again. I had to be strong for Rue.
Chapter 2. Breaking Free. The bus stop was up ahead. I could see it, just a few steps away. My arms ached from holding Rui, but my feet moved steadily, with purpose. No more waiting, no more pleading. This was the beginning of my new life. But the screech of tires cut through my thoughts like a blade. A military jeep veered sharply off the road and skidded to a stop beside me. The door flung open, and Rui WEi stormed out, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. "Are you finished with this nonsense?" he snapped, grabbing my arm. "Get in the car, I'll take you home." I stared at his hand on my arm, his tone of command, his assumption that I still belonged to him, the audacity. "Home?" I said, voice cold. "Back to what? That storage room in the housing block, or the shadow of your charity?" I yanked my arm free. "We're divorced now, Captain Lee. What right do you have to touch me?" His jaw clenched. The word captain hit him like a slap. He was used to me calling him Gege, older brother, love, husband. He wasn't prepared for this steel in my voice. He wasn't prepared for me. "Mei Lin," he growled through clenched teeth, lowering his voice as a few passerbys glanced over. "That divorce was just for the apartment. You know that." I smiled without warmth. "Yes, I know. But I've changed my mind. I don't want the apartment. And I don't want you either." His face twisted. "You're not like this," he said, more to himself than to me. "You were never like this." "No, but you were. I just didn't want to see it." "Mommy, I'm scared," Rui whimpered softly into my neck. I cradled her tighter, kissed her head. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." But Rui WEi stepped in front of me again. "You want to throw a tantrum? Fine," he muttered, "but not in public. You're coming home." I narrowed my eyes. "Ex-wife. And what people think of me is none of your concern anymore." His nostrils flared. "What if Anya sees you like this?" I said softly. "Wouldn't want her to get the wrong idea." That hit the mark. His face went pale, then red, furious, cornered, confused. He had no idea who this new woman standing before him was. Then, just as he opened his mouth to bark another order, "Comrade Mei Lin," a voice called out from across the road. Director Chen from the neighborhood committee approached, his posture upright and warm, wearing his signature white short-sleeve shirt. The moment he noticed Rui WEi's grip on my arm, his expression darkened. "Captain Lee," he said firmly, "what do you think you're doing, putting your hands on a woman in daylight broadlight?" Rui WEi flinched, pulling his hand away like he'd touched fire. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, but I didn't let him spin his lies. "Director Chen," I said, stepping toward him with a grateful smile. "Rui and I were hoping to apply for housing support." His eyes widened. "But you and Captain Lee?" I said clearly, "We've just divorced. The ink is still drying." Rui WEi stiffened, beside me. A silence fell between us. The director's gaze shifted from my face to Rui WEi's. He had seen enough family dramas in this district to know what wasn't being said. Rui WEi tried to laugh it off, his voice brittle.
It's a misunderstanding. My ex-wife is just overreacting. I held Rui close and looked directly into Director Chen's eyes. It's not a misunderstanding, I said calmly. The certificate is in my pocket. Captain Lee divorced me and tried to settle me and our sick daughter in a damp, dark storage room. After. I paused, letting the weight of my words land. Rui has weak lungs. I won't let her live like that anymore. The director's expression hardened into something cold and unmistakably protective. Captain Lee, he said, is that true? Wei tried to stammer a defense. It was just temporary until the new flats were allocated. I shook my head. That's what he told me before, but now that the divorce is real, the apartment might just end up with someone else. I didn't say her name, not yet. But the Director Chen was no fool. He understood the implication. Comrade Mei Lin, he said with quiet resolve, there's a small courtyard house behind the community center. It's modest, but it's clean and safe. It's yours, rent-free for now. My breath caught. Tears threatened behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Thank you, Director Chen, I whispered. Thank you. Chapter 3. The Courtyard of Second Chances. The small courtyard house was tucked behind the community center, hidden behind a wooden gate that creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Vines crawled up the cracked walls. The air smelled faintly of dust and rain. It wasn't much, but it was freedom. Director Chen unlocked the front and stepped aside like he was handing me a key to something sacred. It used to be the community storage unit, he said, but I've always thought it had soul. Inside, there were 2 tiny rooms, a bare kitchen, and a yard with a grapevine trellis that had shed all its leaves for the season. But in my eyes, it was a palace. Rui waddled to the empty trellis and pointed up. Mommy, will it grow leaves in the spring? I knelt beside her, the gravel biting my knees. Yes, sweetheart, I said softly. It'll bloom, and so will we. I cleaned that place like my life depended on it. The next morning, I bought a small sack of rice, some vegetables, and a sliver of pork. I even bought a piece of oilcloth to spread on the floor. One small act of defiance of poverty. That night, as I stirred porridge over a flickering fire, a knock rapped at the gate. I thought it was Director Chen again, maybe bringing more supplies. But it was him, Rui WEi, in civilian clothes, holding a mesh bag filled with fruit, canned goods, and a bottle of imported soy sauce. He looked tired, not defeated, not regretful, just calculating. I brought some things, he said, holding out the bag. I don't need them, I replied without hesitation. We have everything we need now. His hand hovered in the air, unmoving. Mei Lin, stop pretending. You don't even have a kettle in there. What we need, I said evenly, can't be bought. He looked stunned, like for the first time he realized I wasn't trying to wound him, I was simply done. But just as I was about to close the gate, another voice called out from behind him. Oh, you found her. Rui WEi stiffened. A young woman stepped out of a waiting car parked a few yards away. Tall, slender, wrapped in a red silk scarf and confidence. Anya Zhang, the mistress. Ah, she smiled, brushing past Rui WEi like he didn't exist. Comrade Mei Lin, or should I say, Dr. Me? I froze. How do you... Oh, come on, she giggled. Did you think I wouldn't dig into your past? After all, it's not every day a frontline trauma surgeon vanishes from the military hospital roster. What was it again? You disappeared after the malpractice case, didn't you? My blood ran cold. Rui WEi turned sharply. What is she talking about? But I couldn't speak, because I had forgotten, or rather blocked it out, the truth about why I left medicine. The patient, the report, the falsified records, the surgical scalpel that was never accounted for. Anya tilted her head, clearly enjoying the silence. I wonder what Director Chen would think. Sweet little Mei Lin, not just a housewife, a disgraced surgeon with a sealed file. I felt Rui's small hand tighten around me. That woman, this woman who stole my husband, wasn't here for pity or apologies. She was here to remind me that she still held power, that my past wasn't as clean as I wanted it to be. But she had miscalculated, because I was no longer the woman she thought I was. I straightened, eyes locked at hers. "Thank you, Miss Zhang," I said coolly, "for reminding me exactly who I'm dealing with." I turned to Rui WEi. "Take your canned pears and your snake and silk and leave, or next time I won't open the gate." Then I slammed the door shut. Inside, Rui clung to me, frightened. "Mommy, is that lady bad?" I knelt, hands trembling, and kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby," I whispered, "but Mommy's not scared of bad people anymore." I stood, walked into the kitchen, and pulled down the old wooden crate where I kept a locked tin. Inside was a single surgical blade, wrapped in cloth, rusted with time, the only thing I had saved from the hospital that day. And maybe only proof I'd ever need.
Chapter 4: Fire and Fortune. The night after Anya's visit, I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed like a ticking clock in my mind. Malpractice, sealed file, disgrace. I hadn't heard those terms in years, yet she flung them like knives, hoping to reopen wounds I thought had long scarred over. But she made one mistake. She underestimated how far I had come. She thought she could shame me back into silence. She had no idea I was already planning my next move. At dawn, I tied Rui's hair into 2 tiny buns, left her in the care of Auntie Wen next door, and set out with my old bicycle toward the morning market. The streets buzzed with voices, sellers yelling over one another, baskets of chilies gleaming under the rising sun, the scent of garlic and soy saturating the air. I had just enough money left to buy ingredients for my first batch of sauce: fiery red chilies, purple garlic bulbs, fermented soybean paste, sugar, oil, and salt. I inspected each item like a professional again, only now my operating table was the kitchen counter. By midday, my tiny courtyard was alive with color and scent. Rui giggled as she watched me stir the bubbling pot with a long wooden ladle. "Mommy, it smells like it's dancing." I laughed, sweat on my brow. "That's the smell of our future, baby." The first batch yielded 10 jars, thick, ruby red, flecked with crushed garlic and pepper seeds. I labeled each one carefully with a hand-tied ribbon and a tag: Mei's Fire Sauce. It felt small, humble, but it was mine. The next day, I took the bicycle to the textile district's bathhouse gate, where hundreds of female workers gathered after shifts. Most of them skipped dinner or packed bland noodles. I knew what they were missing, and I parked near a shaded corner, set out a tray of warm steamed buns, and began offering free samples of my sauce. For a long time, nothing. Then a skeptical middle-aged worker tasted one bite, and her eyes widened. "Sister, what's in this?" she gasped. "It's sweet at first, then spicy, then boom." Within minutes, I was surrounded. "How much?" "1 yuan per jar," I said confidently. Honest work, real ingredients. By the end of the hour, I had sold out. 12 yuan, clean, pure profit. I didn't cry until I got home. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of power. Over the next few days, I returned with more jars, and each day the line grew longer. I became a whisper in alleyways, the woman with the sauce, the one who sold fire and smiled like thunder. But I wasn't the only one listening. One afternoon, just as I was packing up, a man approached me. Neatly dressed, smooth shoes, shiny watch. "Madam Mei, correct?" I said, "Yes." He handed me a crisp business card embossed with gold characters: Jin Holdings, Food and Hospitality Division. "My employer is interested in your product. He's watched your rise. We'd like to discuss a possible partnership." I blinked. "Your employer?" "Chairman Jin," a name I had feared for over 6 years.
My throat tightened, because Chairman Jin wasn't just a businessman. He was the same man who had overseen the hospital's board, the one that signed the letter sealing my file and ending my surgical career. The same man who had me hunted down and slaughtered in an alley for refusing to turn over the evidence that could destroy him. The same man who ensured my daughter would grow up thinking I abandoned her. But this time, I wasn't afraid to burn everything down and get my revenge. Flashback. After the divorce, we suffered. Rui WEi moved on with his life, forgetting that he had a daughter or an ex-wife. His mistress, Anya Zhang, informed Chairman Jin about my whereabouts, and I had to disappear from the public eye and the town I called home, taking Rui, who had no clue what was happening. A few months later, I got a job working assembly lines in a textile factory, earning just enough to keep a roof over our heads and powdered milk on the table. 2 years after, I lived quietly and trusted no one. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. I dropped Rui WEi off at school, then headed for my shift. But when I stepped into the alley beside the factory, 3 men were waiting. Chairman Jin had hunted me down. He wanted the evidence taken? Evidence I was not willing to give up without a fight. I'm only going to ask once, where's the evidence? I don't have it anymore, I lied, my voice low but steady. But when I looked in Chairman Jin's eyes, I could tell he didn't believe me. He signaled to the man and he lifted his arm and pulled the trigger. I didn't get the chance to scream. When the first blow came, I felt excruciating pain. The second, I was numb. The third, I could feel my body falling to the ground, but it didn't hurt. I lay there praying to be saved, praying for Rui, and wishing I could kill them instead of being killed. I died with regret, worry, sadness, and pain.
End of flashback. Chapter 5. Smoke and Silence. It has been 6 months of hospital visit, waiting rooms, worrying, and finally, Rui's fever broke just before sunrise. I hadn't slept. I sat by her side all night, watching her breathe, listening to the steady rhythm of the monitors in the private hospital suite Chairman Jin had arranged. Outside, the city stirred. Trolleys rattled, birds cried, but inside the hospital, the silence felt heavier than any sound, and I had made a decision. Chairman Jin thought I was cornered, but he didn't know what I'd been building behind the scenes. For 6 months, I played the part of a worrying mother that had no hope or place to turn to. I let him dictate to me. His men watched my every move, waiting for me to slip up and reveal the hiding spot for the evidence. They searched my home. I lived like a prisoner. He said he wanted a production partner, but what he wanted was a fool, someone he could use to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted the evidence in my recipes, and once he got those, that would be the end of me. The only person keeping me alive was my sick daughter. The day before, I had taken the production proposal he handed me and sent it to a contact of my own, someone he never suspected. Dr. Song, the head of the Provincial Food Regulation Agency, a friend of my late mentor, and someone who had always believed in me even after the scandal. He called back within hours, and I explained everything to him. Chairman Jin, he said, that man's entire import division is under review. No need to even ask. I'll be happy to help you take him down. I'll make the first move, just wait for me. All I had to do was provide what Chairman Jin killed for. Evidence. I returned to Rui WEi's bedside as she stirred. Her voice was raspy, but her eyes sparkled. Mummy, did I dream Grandpa Sen brought me flowers? I smiled, brushing her hair from her forehead. He did, sweetheart, and you're going to get better. That afternoon, I dressed simply, tied my hair into a braid, and walked straight into the golden tower that housed Jin Holdings. I wasn't escorted in this time, and I had no fear. I demanded to see him. He met me in a marble-floored conference room on the 23rd floor, alone. His smile as snake-smooth as always. Have you come to accept my offer? He asked, voice low and confident. No, I replied coolly. I've come to end your life. I tossed a thick manila folder on the table. Inside, copies of the sealed malpractice case, timestamps from surveillance cameras, logbooks from the surgical wing, and forensic handwriting analysis proving that someone had altered my patient notes. Everything the regulatory agency needs, I said softly, to expose how you pinned the death of my niece on me so your real protege, Dr. Kan, could take my place on the Overseas Medical Board. Chairman Jun's face drained of color. You? He continued, I was your scapegoat. But I kept everything, because one day I knew I'd stop being afraid. He reached for the folder, but I slammed my palm down on it. I've already sent a copy to the agency, another to the Ministry of Health, and a third to the People's Daily. Also, the police is downstairs. His mask cracked, and he looked at me with a murderous glare. What do you want? He hissed. I leaned in. I want you out of my way. I stood, smoothing the creases of my blouse. I'll build my own factory. I already secured private funding from a women's entrepreneur association funded by none other than Dr. Song's wife. We'll start exporting in 2 months. I don't need your production lines. I don't need your brand. I am the brand. And you or my daughter, he added with ice, will never live in anyone's shadow. Chairman Jin stared at me, speechless. He looked like a man who had never been denied anything in his life and had no idea how to handle it. I walked to the door. Oh, I said, turning one last time. Do try to stay out of the news this week. You won't like the headlines, and if anything happens to me or my daughter, you will be their first suspect. Back in my courtyard, Rui WEi was sitting up with a sketch pad, drawing a messy version of our grape trellis. You're back, she beamed. Yes, my love, I said, crouching to hug her. Mommy just had to finish something. That night, as the stars blinked quietly above, I opened a bottle of my latest batch, now labeled with gold leaf print, reading Phoenix Sauce, born from fire. Because that's who I had become, not a divorcee, not a wife, not a victim, but the fire itself. Chapter 6. The Phoenix Rises. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Chairman Jin under investigation for medical cover-up. Whistleblower doctor clears her name after 6 years. Former surgeon launches groundbreaking sauce brand backed by Women's Collective. The streets buzzed with whispers. Cafes, clinics, bathhouses, everyone was talking about her. The woman with the past like a ghost story and the sauce that made your mouth sing. I went to the market, head held high, greeting my customers by name, handed out samples, laughed with factory workers, and stood beneath the blooming trellis in my courtyard as if I had never once been shamed. Because I hadn't survived, I had won. I was proud of myself. In my previous life, I wouldn't have had the courage to step away from a husband who didn't love me or a marriage that did not serve or benefit me. I wouldn't have had the courage to avenge myself and clear my medical record, all because I was afraid that, if I spoke up, no one would care or believe me. I was wrong, and I'm happy I got this second chance to do right by me and my daughter. A week later, the doctors called me in for Rui's final scan. She sat on the exam table swinging her legs, rosy-cheeked and full of chatter. I gripped the edge of my seat, my fingers trembling, afraid to hope even now. The past 3 months had been a blur of sleepless nights and whispered prayers. Rui had barely been able to sleep through the night with coughing fits so violent they left her gasping for air, her tiny chest rising and falling like a bird trying to breathe through a storm. The doctor had told me the truth in the quietest voice possible. She had developed severe pneumonia, likely a result of the damp, mold-infested apartment we had lived in before the courtyard. The same place where I had held her close through freezing nights, believing love could keep her warm enough. But love wasn't medicine, and the hospital didn't have what she needed. He said, her lungs are too young to withstand this strain. The infection is aggressive. Without the right treatment, we may lose her. He promised to try and order the medication from overseas, said it could take a week. It took 2 months. But not 2 months of me sitting and awaiting. It was 2 months of herbal teas, of every kind. I inquired with the elders about the best herbs and cold compresses for her.
I sang soft lullabies, and I clutched her feverish body, giving her all my warmth, because there was no way I got another chance just to lose my baby, the only person worth living for. I prayed each night for a miracle on this small hospital bed. He had given me something to ease her discomfort, but it was barely enough to take the edge off. Every breath she took felt like a battle I couldn't fight for her. 2 weeks ago, whilst pacing the bright hospital room wondering what to do, he finally told us that the medication was in. But even then, his voice carried no celebration. He said, "We will give it to her, but don't expect much before her scheduled scan. It might be too late to make a difference." I listened and nodded, but I wasn't going to let my baby die. I refused. I crushed each pill with steady hands, stirred them into tea laced with herbs I had prayed over, and whispered to Rui, "Hold on, baby, just a little longer." I worked, I hoped, I begged whatever gods were listening. I kissed her warm cheeks every morning and told her stories of all the things we would do when she got better, even when a small voice inside me feared she would never get the chance to live the way I hoped she would. And now we were here. She sat on the exam table, legs swinging, eyes wide with curiosity. I couldn't tell if the color in her cheeks was health or my hope pretending again. I held my breath as the doctor studied her scans in silence. Then he turned, eyes wide, voice caught in his throat. "There's nothing there," he said finally, stunned. "No scarring, no fluid. It's like her lungs were never touched. She's completely clear." I stared at him, not fully understanding. "Are you sure?" He nodded, slowly, still watching the scan as if trying to convince himself it was real. "Beyond sure. I checked 3 times already. This isn't recovery. It's a miracle." Rui grinned, oblivious. "Can we go get dumplings now, Mummy?" I wrapped her in her arms, tears finally slipping down my cheeks. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of awe. "Yes, baby," I whispered. "Anything. Everything." 1 year later, we finally held our official factory opening. The Phoenix Sauce banner hung tall above the gates. The building buzzed with celebration. Laughter, camera flashes, champagne, and drums from the local school troupe. Rui wore a tiny red cham-sam and ran between the tables, handing out mini jars tied with gold string. And I wore white, the same white I wore the day I was dismissed from the hospital. But this time, I wasn't the accused. I was the architect of a legacy. And then, just before the final toast, the crowd parted. He stood at the edge of the courtyard. Rui WEi. He looked nothing like the officer I once loved. The shine in his eyes was gone, his uniform replaced
by a wrinkled linen shirt, his shoulders slightly hunched from burdens I didn't carry anymore. Rui WEi saw him and paused. I knelt and whispered, "You can go to your father and say hi if you want to." She shook her head. "No, Mommy, I just want to stay with you."
Hi everyone.
She skipped
Thank
off
you
to
so
play
much
again,
for
and I
sticking
turned to
around
face
and
him.
listening to this
Rui WEi
audiobook.
walked forward slowly.
If you enjoyed the story,
I saw the news,
please don't
he
forget
said.
to like,
You
share, and
really
subscribe
did
to
it?
support my
You
growing
used
channel.
to say that you were
It
going to
truly
start a
means
big
the
business,
world to
but
me.
you
I'd love
knew
to
you
hear
had
your
it in
thoughts.
you?
Let me know
I
in the
said nothing.
comments what you
He
enjoyed
just
most
wanted to
about
say,
the book.
"I'm
and
sorry,
if you'd be
I made a
interested in a
mistake,"
second
he said.
edition featuring
I
Rui
nodded
WEi
once.
as the lead.
He looked at me
This
with
is my
pride.
first release,
and
I
I'm
am
proud of you.
depending on your feedback
That
and support
too,
to keep
I
this channel
accepted.
going.
But when he
Until
looked
next
at me,
time,
like a man
stay
hoping
safe,
for something more,
stay inspired,
I spoke gently
keep
but
dreaming,
firmly.
and keep
"Thank you, Lee.
choosing
If you didn't divorce me, I wouldn't have the courage to start over. But this chapter of the story does not involve you, Rui WEi." He lowered his eyes. Then he smiled, and for the first time, it looked real. "I understand, but I hope we can at least be friends." I nodded again. He turned, and this time, I didn't feel the need to watch him go. As lanterns lit the courtyard and music swelled, Director Chen raised a toast. "To the Phoenix," he said, eyes shining. "To Mei Lin, who rose from ashes, fed a city, and gave her daughter a future." Glasses clinked. Rui WEi ran into my arms. I lifted her high, spun her around, and looked at the sky. The stars blinked back, quiet and bright. I had no husband, no regrets, just fire in my blood to conquer all my fears and live well. Also, to establish a name the whole city would remember. Mei Lin, the woman who burned, then bloomed. Chapter 7. New Horizons. 10 years had passed since the night of the grand opening, the night the city learned the name Mei Lin and the miracle of Phoenix sauce. Rui WEi was no longer the rosy, cheap chatterbox on the hospital's examination table. She is now a confident, bright-eyed of 16 years with her mother's fierce spirit and a smile that could light up the darkest alleyway. They had long moved out of the courtyard, but it still blossoms into a garden of laughter and greenery, a peaceful refuge for other single mothers that need a safe space. Her house was bigger now, graced with sweeping verandas, a stone path through a courtyard filled with orchids, and walls painted in soft jade, the same color as the heirloom pendant Mei Lin once sold to save a life. That life, Rui WEi's, was now just a quiet shadow in her history. She stood at the kitchen window, watching her daughter practice Tai Chi under the morning sun. Rui WEi's movements were graceful, deliberate, like the flowing river, a dance between strength and calm. "Mom! Mom! Look! Look!" Rui WEi called out, pausing mid-move. "Look! I can do the whole form now!" Mei Lin smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "You've come so far, Rui." Just as she was about to call Rui WEi in for breakfast, her youngest son flew past her and dashed towards her sister. She quickly dodged him and started to chase her baby brother through the herb beds, her long hair flowing behind her like a silk banner. She had grown into a stunning young woman, full of life. "Come here, monkey," she called, scooping up 5-year-old Tao into her arms. He giggled wildly, clutching her neck. Mei Lin stepped onto the veranda, carrying a tray of chilled barley tea. Her third child, little Miyu, toddled behind her with a stuffed panda dragging in one hand. "Careful on the steps, baby," Mei Lin called gently. "I'm big," Miyu declared, planting herself down with a stubborn little thud. "Yes, you are," Rui said with a laugh, handing Tao over to their mother. They were her everything, these 4 children, each a symbol of a chapter in her life. But the one who brought it all together? That was Jian, her husband, the man who had walked into her life not as a rescuer, but as an equal. A widower raising a daughter alone, he had come to her factory 3 years after the grand opening, seeking a supplier for his eco-packaging company. He had no interest in her fame, just her fire, and she had seen in his quiet strength a kind of peace she never thought she deserved. He adored her, not the legend, her. Now, Jian came out from the side garden, wiping his hands on a towel. "There's a mint bush taking over the back wall," he said. "I think it's waging war." "Let it try," Mei Lin replied with a smile, handing him the tea. He kissed her on the temple before scooping Miyu into his arms. "Does the Empress want a mango popsicle?" he said with mock gravity. "Then the Empire shall provide," Rui WEi joked with a deep voice, heading into the kitchen. Mei Lin sat beside Jian, Tao curled up in her lap. The late afternoon sun filtered through the bamboo trees, casting soft shadows on the tiled floor. She looked out at the land they had cultivated. Not just the garden, not just the business, but the life. "I can't believe Rui WEi is leaving soon for college next year, and Hannah's graduating this year," she murmured. Jian reached for her hand. "They'll be fine. We raise strong young women, just like you." "I just can't believe it. They used to be so little. Now they're conquering the world one step at a time." "That's what phoenixes do," Jian whispered. The end.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to this audiobook. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support my growing channel. It truly means the world to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you enjoyed most about the book, and if you'd be interested in a second edition featuring Rui WEi as the lead. This is my first release, and I am depending on your feedback and support to keep this channel going. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired, keep dreaming, and keep choosing you.